Great score, Adam. There is so much to like about this, and there is a lot of polish. That said, I think that there are still some things that could be done in terms of contrasts, contrast between strengths and between the characters of different instruments, and also in balancing the dynamics in certain places and just, looking at the realities of the instruments, right? So, for instance, here, you have got the same dynamic markings as the wind section, but you can hear for yourself, can't you, that the second horn there is really strong. It's so much stronger than the rest of the winds there that it really is dominating the meaning, right? Like everything becomes about the horns here, and you are compounding the problem by marking mezzo piano on the first horn, right? And I know what you're thinking here. You're thinking, well, I'm going to crescendo to mezzo piano, and then both instruments are going to go diminuendo to pianissimo. But the truth of this is that one really cannot hear the clarinets at all here, right? So you could have left the clarinets out in this bar, and nobody would have been the wiser. Now, if you drop the dynamic here to pianissimo, and then this becomes piano, and then the diminuendo goes back to pianissimo, then I think you'll have a balanced sound here. Now, in a situation like this, where you have a dynamic marking, and then you have a set of hairpins, a pair of hairpins, crescendo and then diminuendo, you do not need to mark a dynamic at the end. It's only when there is a change, right, like this, when you're going crescendo to mezzo forte and then down to mezzo piano, that it's really indicated, right? But in this case, you were really careful about it here, but like, where are we headed? Like, how soft are we getting here? Are you just saying, well, of course, if we put a diminuendo hairpin here, of course it's going to be piano at the end? Well, then if that's so, then why did you mark it here, right? So look, you have got to, like, when there are changes indicated by, overall dynamic changes indicated by the hairpins, then you do have to mark the destination, right? And when there are not, like when it is something that is just returning back to the original dynamic, then you do not have to mark it, because that in itself is the lack of a marking is also has meaning, right? Okay, so you kind of didn't need to do that. All right. Now I like the use of E flat clarinet in here, but the problem is that, like, you've changed, like, in your efforts to sort of change things around, you are changing, like right in this bar, you're changing the harmonic meaning of the and you end up with, I think it ends up a little weaker right in here. So watch out for that. Now, if you have been watching my other evaluations with any regularity by now, Adam, you'll probably have heard me say that a lot of people just drop the piano slurring onto the winds, and that is not necessarily a great thing. And also, I have many objections to just slurring across the downbeat over and over and over and over again, so that there's almost no emphasis on it, right? Nobody is tonguing the downbeat anywhere, right? So, like right here, tongue on the downbeat, then not, then not, then not, then not, until, except for the horns, right? And then not, except for the E flat clarinet. Then not, right? So where is the, this is the kind of situation where somebody might raise their hand and say, who's got the downbeat at bar such and such, right? Who's playing on the beat? So you've got to just really watch out about so much slurring. It's like, do you really want everything to be ta ta ta, or do you want ta 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 ta? Do you really want some definition, right? So just really think about those things. Now, I really appreciate, though, how you did not just slur over repeated notes. That's great. Okay, that is something. I'm not saying it's an anathema or anything, but the thing is, to just do it carelessly is kind of like the opposite of a craft approach, right? Like that, if you are crafting in the concert sphere, then you need to think about slurring and tonguing and breath and phrasing and so on as a tool that you can use, right? Not just something that you ignore. All right, so in that case, like I would say, to that degree, I would say that this was actually, stood out in avoiding that, and that was great. Now, as far as the scoring itself on this first page, we are starting to see certain things pop up in scores, certain approaches that feel obvious, like flute and English horn in octaves. That is a really beautiful combination, especially with clarinets at the bottom. The English horn having kind of flute-like characteristics in it, and also serving as a bridge to the reed sound of the clarinets. That's wonderful. And then you continue on with this. This is nice. The other thing about like having horns here with unbalanced dynamics is that your whole plan here to bring in the second flute in sixths, also the second flute just basically gets obliterated by the strength of the horns, right? So once again, we're seeing in here like low flute being put in a place where oboe would have been so much stronger. Oboe or clarinet or any other option besides low flute. So I just really have to ask everybody, why do you think that flute in octaves, like that adding a low flute in an octave or a sixth down or whatever, is going to be a sound that is going to contribute to the texture, right? When you listen to your mock-up and it isn't there, or it is swallowed by other instruments, like in this case the horns and so on and so forth. Why is everybody doing that? So just like logistically, even just instinctively, it is something that isn't going to contribute very much, right? So please think about it before you throw in low flute. And even at this, we have a soft. Everything should be really, really soft, right? What wrecks the flute? The horns, right? It's just boom. It's just right there. So please think about the logistics of adding low flute into any kind of texture, into any kind of complex texture. The lower the flute goes, the more everything should be stripped away to accommodate it, right? Rather than it just being buried. Okay. So that's my little rant. So now to continue on, so this is all real nice right in here. And once again, I think that this could have been piano crescendo, diminuendo to pianissimo. And then this sounding E wouldn't just sort of honk away. Like you can even hear it in the mock-up. It is really dominating everything in here, right? So if it were pianissimo, you'd get a balance. And then this is just devastating right in here. This is beautiful. I really love your use of the piano in this score. Just as a sweetener, one place you are using it to interpret the piano arpeggios, and that I think you're going a little too far, but we'll talk about that when I get to it. Yeah, but everything else, very, very cool. I like this. This could have also been pizzicato, like just a sostenuto pizzicato, just holding on to that E for as long as possible. But it's also good bowed. Yeah. So this is really nice right in here. I like that. I approve of it. Good job. All right. Now, on to the next screen. Yeah, this is also really cool. Okay, so once again, here we have a situation where you have brought out the trumpet, right? And you don't need to do that. Piano trumpet solo has a beautiful grace and color to it. It will naturally dominate everything that is happening here. It does not need to be mezzo piano. I challenge you just to take your mock-up, get rid of the M on this P, play it back, and then you will hear that the trumpet sounds perfectly fine without needing to be boosted up into a dynamic where it has less. I feel it has less color and expression, right? I think piano has its own sensibility, its own domain. It is something that does not need to be moderated, right? It does not need to be lessened in impact and color and drama. Right, so anytime you add a mezzo to something, you are reducing its dramatic, I feel, You're reducing its dramatic capabilities. Now, that differences, of course, when you're trying to balance things. You're trying to bring an instrument up that is naturally kind of buried. But like, you take this down to piano and you will hear the harp much more clearly, right? Leave the harp mezzo piano though. This is beautiful harp scoring, by the way. This is just exactly what to do with harp. Is just, it's the icing on the cake. It's the filigree, right? It's the silver lining to the cloud. It is, it has a really specific function. It does not need to just double parts that are in the original piano part. It really can, it doesn't all have to be just candy and sugar icing, but that's really where its strength is in this kind of scoring. Cool idea of having a pulse here in the timpani, and to sort of like use that pulse to kick off the patterns, the interpretation of the patterns. That's nice. And this is very cool in here. But I would just submit to you that here's where we start to get into questions of proportion, right? Like you have the horns playing below your trumpets, and that all seems good, right? And it's nice and solid, right? Now here you have your middle strings come in and sort of take the position of the horns to a degree, although they are sort of doing alternating patterns and middle voice and everything else, right? Okay. So all the same, I just really feel a big hole in here, right? It's like, because the horns are so warm and delicious. It's so much support. Do the strings offer that? Could you have done something to double this in here? Could this line have been played by E-flat clarinet and the clarinets come in and doubled the strings, so to make the strings warmer in a way that the horns were, right? Right, and then here, when the trombones come back, it feels rather abrupt, right? So it's all a sense of proportions. And then here you have like the answering call of winds and strings to what the trumpets were playing, or and here, like, since everybody is mezzo forte, guess what happens? This is like a sort of a pale echo. It isn't a strong response. So at mezzo forte, like in close proximity, in close timbral and pitch proximity, the comparison really does make a difference. So mezzo forte, that's all perfectly fine. What if your winds right here were forte, right? As a response to this, then I think you would see the proportions balancing better. And then with the brass coming in at fortissimo, it wouldn't be such a sudden jump because, compared to the strings, right? So let's just take it from the viewpoint of the strings and the winds with their mezzo forte. This is forte compared to them, and this is fortissimo compared to them. So what is happening? Forte, oh, by the way, and then fortissimo compared to these guys, right? So just bring up the winds and the strings right in here, maybe push into it, to forte, and then this comparative fortissimo with respect to them makes more sense, right? All right, so that would be my attempts to balance this page, right? Okay, but I don't want to dwell on it too much because there's so much going on at C, and there's so much going on to B. But just in general, though, I feel the scoring here is really nice. I love the idea of these repeated notes, and I love the way that you are sort of creatively dividing up the interpretation of the left-hand patterns in the piano part. I think that's all nice. I think if you go to forte here, you could go to fortissimo and then back off here, down to piano, right? And then come back at mezzo piano. All right, so moving on. Okay, so here we're getting into some fun stuff, some interesting things. So this is where I sort of took issue. I just feel it's too much like the piano part, and I mean I know you're trying to make it feel more kind of piano concerto like, or or just adding to it, but it just really feels like it's being dropped in here, and I'm not so sure that this double octave right in here is adding anything to it. I feel that it is sort of dragging it down, right? The beautiful sense of lonely wandering of this. I feel, when you add pitches 2 octaves before tracking it, I feel like we lose the sense of freedom and curiosity and so on and so forth, right? So it's an aesthetic thing, right? And then of course you've got the violas filling in the octave as well, right? So it just becomes this big stack. I'm not sure that really works in terms of the emotion of the passage. So this is all fine. I like the way that this begins. Yeah. I would say one thing. I don't feel that this is enough. Like the bassoons are sort of carrying, like like they're introducing. You're leaving this very low, much softer, much less radiant instrument the job of leading in, along with the violas, into the next bar, and I'm not sure that works. Yeah, but this is really nice though, right in here. Right, so it's just a question of proportions, musical meaning, blah blah blah. You know what I mean? But it's still like it. I feel that it's not quite there yet, right? Right, and then I think some basic balancing. If you're going to have the horns and the brass sharing air so closely in such close proximity with the strings and everything else, you should just balance this out, right? Mezzo piano for everybody should be piano for the the brass pad, right? Just really bring everything down. And once again, look, I don't want to be that guy who is always saying, mark down the brass, mark up the harp, right? In terms of the dynamics. It's just that so many people are scoring in such a way so that is the only solution, right? I'm seeing very few scores where the brass has enough space and is scored in such a way that it balances without having to have its dynamics adjusted. Even like, let's say that you completely don't pay attention to my advice and this gets sent to an orchestra, and the conductor will be looking at the brass right in here, and he'll be sort of like doing the downward hand motion, right? Just a sort of like, it sort of looks like somebody patting a dog on the head, right? It's just ease off a little bit on all of this. So if that's going to happen anyways, then just write it in, okay? Yeah. Now this, see right in here, this isn't as necessary because of the way everything is scored, right? So you wouldn't need to mark down the horn right in here. That would all work fine. Yeah, so I feel that like if the piano just did this one thing and then there was an answer in the harp and then you laid off the triple octaves, I think that this would be magical. And that this convinces me the least of all, because I just really feel that if this is turning into a piano piece with some orchestration around it, right? That is the trap of adding a piano part and then having the piano part do things literally from the score, right? So you can get away with a little bit, but after a while, people are just saying, oh, he's doing an homage to the piano piece, and then like, oh, well, it is the piano piece now, with a little bit of orchestra around it. All right, so just really watch out for that trap. You got one foot starting to sink into the quicksand here. So I just say really watch out. You've already got all that covered in your cellos and basses, and to a degree in your lower winds and so on. So you don't need this. This is completely unnecessary. And also, wouldn't it be nice to have a contrast of color right in here? What if this were harp and this were piano without all of the extra stuff? Just like end here with a rolled chord and get rid of this get rid of everything in these two bars in the bottom staff. Right, so there's ways of doing this where you maintain that sort of tip of the hat to the original piece without becoming the original piece, right? We want to avoid that, I hope. All right, so now on to C. So I'm noticing with these dotted semi-breve entries that people are putting a lot of energy into section C, and I feel like here the choice of piano is really validated. It's just beautiful. I think that these little touches here work so well. I would say that, like, if you're going to do this, you don't really, like, the harp is completely unnecessary. Like, that nobody's going to hear it, right? But the trading off between the harp and the piano, that's all very cool. I would mark the harp up to mezzo piano or even mezzo forte here, and then you would get a balance between these elements, right? What if you went right in here? What if you did piano and then just stopped here and had the harp come in with two notes, like just get rid of these first three notes. Had the harp come in with a crescendo into mezzo forte, and by the way, here you have these beautiful slurs. Where's the slurs for the harp? What is showing them that it's phrased, right? What if you got rid of these and then did this, and then just had the piano just sort of ease into the harp part and disappear, and let the harp come over or take over, right? I think that would be a really beautiful trade-off. The way that it is now, the piano will dominate, and just we'll barely hear the end of this harp right in here. Okay, all right, and then just a lovely little breathy glissando right in there. All righty, yeah. So now to talk about the overall effect. I love the idea of turning the entire string section into this into just sort of pizzicato, right? And then like having this yeah. So piano in the pizzicato, right? And piano in the winds equals pianissimo in the trumpets, right? Or here you're going piano diminuendo. That's fine. Right, so this could be, but I think you'd need to put the diminuendo in here as well for that to work. All right, but just really ease off of it. And this is really interesting in here, this octave timpani stuff, right? So my sense here is that, like, to the ear, right, it'll feel just like pizzicato a lot of the time, except you're throwing in the rolls to kind of like differentiate it. So I mean, that's all good. It kind of has a fun. Has a fun quality to it. All right. So here we go back to flute and English horn with the clarinet kind of taking the middle position, right? So you've got a triple octave with bassoons on the bottom. So I almost feel like there's a slight. Not that it's top heavy or anything like that, but just, I'm not totally convinced by this because I almost feel like the bottom is a little, it's just a little underpowered, right? Compared to everything that is happening above. It just feels a little underpowered to me. See, like here's where pianissimo horns would have worked really, really well. But like you really have got everybody tied up. However, I have a solution for you, and that is notice something important about your violas here. The lowest pitch in your violas is an open G, right? Or is a G. I don't know, it would probably be played as an open string. There's no reason why that couldn't be taken over. This entire part here could be taken over by the second violins. You don't need the extra strength in your violins. You've got plenty enough as it is, the way everything is balanced. So what if your second violins were playing the viola part and the violas were doubling the bassoons? Then I think you would get a beautiful balance for this triple octave with the thirds below. Right? Of course, the violas couldn't dip down to this slow G, but you've already got that covered in other instruments. Okay. So yeah. So now, continuing on, see, now you're bringing in the brass again, and once again, like, everything is in really close proximity, and the here you've got mezzo piano staccato strings, and here you got mezzo forte staccato strings, and all along the way you have brass playing along at the same exact dynamic over the same range of pitches and everything else, and on top of the winds. So it's not going to balance the way that it is, especially like this unison, right? So don't say open, say senza sword right here on the first break. And then, and then continuing on. All right. So, so open. All right. So this is going to be stronger, perhaps, than the mock-up, even than the mock-up is telling you. But the mock-up, really, like right in here, what happens? Everything disappears but the brass. Or, I mean, it doesn't completely disappear, but is really around the margins. It really reminds me of, some people who've been doing some important stuff, and then, sort of the paid honchos come in, and like the whole team is sort of looking over their shoulders. That's what it sort of sounds like. The other instruments are looking over the shoulders of the brass right in here. So what's the solution? I'm sorry to say this once again, but mark it down to piano. So piano, mezzo forte, and then this will all balance, right? So I mean, if you don't want to do that, then you have to score things differently, right? You've got to give the brass more space. And then even at that, if the brass are playing in such a way that their overtones are dominating everything above it, then, equally you might have to mark them down, even if they have plenty of space to do what they need to do. It just really is a matter of proportion, okay? All right, so, having said all that, I've seen scores like this, and where everything, the brass are marked exactly the same as everybody else, and it goes to the stage, and the players know what to do, especially in a smaller orchestra setting where they really don't have the budget for a full string section and so on. So the brass and the winds are always used to playing down a little bit, and especially the brass. Right, so sometimes the conductor does not even have to say anything, but that doesn't mean that you don't have the benefit of wisdom to mark everything down a little bit. The players will get it, right? I've talked about the dangers of mixing up of mixed dynamic markings, where one set of players thinks that the other set of players is playing the same dynamic as them, and so they adjust up or down in the wrong way, right? But that is not going to happen in a difference between brass and everybody else. The brass are used to being asked to play a little bit lower. It's just something that happens because of the approaches of scoring, where the brass are integrated into the texture in that way, where they just have to beat down a little bit, right? I mean, we're seeing it. What's cool about these Berlioz lectures that I've been releasing, that I did just on Patreon last year, is that he's already looking forward to that. He's already seeing the independence of things and the way that he's reordering the way that texture works in the orchestra. It is necessary to back off on the brass from time to time. Okay, so that this goes back 200 years, almost. 190 years at this point. So I really love what you did here at the end of C. It just really is so fun, right? I almost feel like there could have been, like, with this particular moment, especially with the harps, with the flutes and the clarinets working together here. I felt this could have been a place to bring in some harp filigree over the top, right? If the brass were marked down to mezzo forte, or piano filigree, right? That would even be a better chance. However, I feel that, like, if you do that, if you bring the brass down a little bit, then you don't need so much solidity in your wind scoring, right? Like, you don't need A2 flutes, you don't need A2 clarinets. A2 bassoons is fine, right? Because you're just turning this into an octave here, and the same thing happens to the oboes. But yeah, so just being aware that like A2 clarinets means that you get that phased sound, right? I'm a little disappointed that nothing else happened with the E flat clarinet, right? I mean, there's what happened at C. Now, if we go up, same thing. There's just like a little teeny touch of E flat clarinet. So, and there's like not a whole lot going on in the second part of A. So, a little disappointed by that, Adam. But all the same, I really did like this score. There was just so much enjoyable about it. And I know I've been just sort of dissecting the guts of it and taking a look at it and say, how could you fix this? How could you fix that? How could things blend better and so on? That doesn't mean that it was badly orchestrated or anything like that. Actually, sometimes the better something is orchestrated, the more I start to sort of roll up my sleeves and say, how can we make this absolutely perfect? So the motivations of my energy levels in different evaluations are very strange. They're mysterious to me. But I will say one thing, and that is that there was a great deal of imagination and individuality in this score. And you should feel really proud of it, Adam. So great work. Thank you so much for the work that you put into this and for the support on Patreon and for your participation in this and in other, if my memory is serving me correctly, in previous orchestration challenges, and just really appreciate that. I think you're really going to love the next 3 challenges. They're all really different from one another, and they all present different types of challenges, different types of scoring, even if you choose to follow certain paths. But I've talked about that in other evaluations. You're going to have to just go check them out. Thanks everybody for watching this far and for for the comments that I know you're going to leave. Yeah, in support of Adam, in him trying to figure out how to make this the best score it possibly could be. I'm sure you have got a lot of suggestions, and I look forward to reading them myself. And as for me, I am just going to go on and evaluate something else today. So I'll see you in that video soon.